Hi everyone, my name is Tori, this is Novel Life, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have my January wrap up to share with you. I read a total of 18 books in January, which is a very good start for me for 2024. I am very happy with the books that I read. I had a lot of 5 stars, I had a lot of good reads, I had a lot of favorite reads that I think are going to make it on my top books of the year at the end of the year, even though I read them in January. So I do have a couple statistics. I went back and forth on whether or not in my wrap-ups that I want to continue doing statistics or completely leave them out. Now, I did read, like I said, 18 books, and I had a total of 7,520 pages that were read, and that is across ebook, audio, and physical books. I just look on Goodreads or Amazon for, whether the Kindle or the paperback. I try to stick with paperbacks. I feel like that's more consistent, and I just totaled up all the pages. I did read technically one physical book. While I do have most of the books I'm going to talk about physically, I either read them on audio or a mix of audio and the physical book. So primarily I had one book that I read physically. I had 2 ebooks, which were actually 2 arcs, so that's why I read them on my Kindle. And then I had 15 audios. Clearly audios are dominating my reading, and that is because just how easy and the convenience of just popping in my, AirPods or anything like that and reading. I had 2 DNFs that do not count towards that 18 books. Those are completely separate. That I just know that I had 2 DNFs this month. No 1 star, no 2 star. I had 3 3-star books, 2 3.5 stars, 2 4 stars, and 11 5 stars. So my average rating for the month was 4.39, which is really good for me. That means I've been reading some pretty good books and rating them really well. While I did have some average books, at least I didn't have any 1 or 2 stars. I do have my reading journal from Little Inklings Designs. I think these are sold out. If they are not, I will link it in the description box, but I really like this layout, and I've been journaling a lot over on my Patreon. So I dive into this and what's in it and journaling and all of that stuff over on my Patreon. So you can go join at the top tier if you would like more journaling content from me. But I have been keeping up with adding the picture, my comments, the tropes, the names, the page numbers. I'm pretty proud of myself that I actually kept up with that this month, and I had a really fun time doing journaling sprints over my Patreon. Like I said, that definitely helped me keep up with them. So with all that being said, we're going to jump in. I do have a recent reads video where I talk about, I think, like 9 or 10 of these books in that video. I'll link it in the cards in the description box below. It's kind of like a mid-month wrap up that I did, but I just had some reads that I wanted to sit down and talk about, so I did. That's not going to be an every month thing. So the first couple books I'm going to run through relatively quickly. I'm going to give you my rating and a very, very, very brief synopsis of them. And yeah, with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive in because I'm excited to talk about all 18 books. The very first book that I read in 2024 was Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling. This is a fantasy romance where there's a lot of dragons. Our female character, you see that she has been hidden away for many, many years from her father, who has basically held her captive. She was basically a captive in her own kingdom. She ran away with her uncle, and now she is back and older and wiser and just more badass, and she is ready to claim her throne back, get her dragons back that her father has kept from her. And yeah, I gave this 5 stars. First book of the year. It was a 5-star read. I read this book physically. I loved the storytelling in this book. It was such a good romantasy, like it's a true romantasy, a true blend of romance and fantasy, like an even blend of both, and I really love that. I love our characters. Caden and Elowyn are 2 really good characters that complement each other really, really well. Usually in romance, like one is more powerful than the other, but both of those characters are very strong and very independent, and they understand that they need each other for this alliance that they've formed in this book, and I personally loved it. I would highly recommend this as a romantasy if you want to dive into more romantasy in 2024. Definitely check out this one. But it was the first read of 2024, and it was a 5-star read for me. The next one was a contemporary small town romance, and that was Rain, Meen by Kayla Gross. I personally thought that this book was just okay. I gave it 3 stars. It was not the best. It was not the worst. The writing was solid. I just didn't emotionally connect with the characters like I wanted to. Like I would expect to, reading the back of this book in the blurb. Like you just think it's going to be a very, very emotional book, and it's not. It kind of let me down in that way. But like I said, this is a small town romance. I would say that there's trigger warnings for a lot of talk about grief, trauma. There's trauma bonding between them 2. Like they both go through things separately, and so when they come together, they really form a friendship and connection over that. And he's a cowboy. I listened to the audiobook. I want to point out the narrators for the audiobooks that I do read. So the narrators were Desiree Ketchum and Grayson Owens. I love Desiree Ketchum, but I really liked Grayson Owens in this book as well. I didn't emotionally connect with the story as much as I wanted to. The next book I read was a historical fiction book, and that was Atalanta by Jennifer Saint. So I love Jennifer Saint's Ariadne book. I haven't read Electra. I do want to. I really thought that this was going to be a 4.5 star book until the last 75 pages. I listened to the audiobook. Beth Eyre did a really good job voicing the characters. The ending took a little bit of a twist that I wasn't personally expecting. So I gave it 3 stars. I ended up landing at a 3-star just because it was so jarring and so different from the rest of the story that I was like, why is this happening? I don't know why she wrote it this way other than to cause conflict. And it personally just wasn't my favorite. Will I still be a fan of Jennifer Saint? Absolutely. I just wish that ending wasn't like that. But like I said, I do want to read Electra. That was the book that came before this. I want to collect all of her hardbacks. I have to buy Electra at some point, but this one was at Barnes & Noble at the end of December. Picked it up. And it was an okay read. I'm still a fan of her writing. She writes in a very interesting way. This is basically like a reimagining, retelling of Atalanta. The beginning of this book definitely explains how Atalanta became Athena's, I would say, protege. That was like the best word I can describe, but it was a good read. Just not my favorite. And then I did a whole historical romance reading vlog where I wanted to fall back in love with historical romances, and I read 3 historical romances for that reading vlog. I'll have it in the cards and link down below, so I'm going to run through these pretty quickly because I dive into my thoughts a lot. The first one was a reread, and that was Devin Winter by Lisa Kleypas. Lisa Kleypas is one of my favorite historic romance authors of all time, and Devin Winter is one of my favorite books by her of all time. So I physically read this and listened to the audio. The narrator is Mary Jane Wells. She does an amazing job with a lot of Lisa Kleypas' stuff. She's one of my favorite historical romance narrators because she does a lot. I love this. Sebastian and Evie are 2 of my favorite characters. I love this. I love being back in this world. The Wallflowers is book 3 in the Wallflower series by Lisa Kleypas. So yeah, this was a 5-star reread for me. And then I picked up Lorraine Heath's, I think, newest one. She has a new book coming out this year, but this is her newest one that's out, and that is The Notorious Lord Knightley. And this was also a 5-star read. This is Second Chance. There's a little bit of a secret and surprise baby, a little bit. That actually really surprised me. This is a friends to enemies to lovers. Basically, our main male character and our female character, they form this very interesting friendship and relationship, and then he leaves her at the altar, and now it's years later, and she's like a scorned woman back. It is so good. If you could read any historical, read this one. I absolutely loved it. I go into my thoughts more in that vlog, but this was like a new favorite historical for me. And the last book that I read for that historic romance reading vlog was The Duke Gets Desperate by Diana Quincy. So I did listen to the audiobook. I grabbed this from my library. I hadn't read a Diana Quincy in a really long time. Now, our female character is an Arab American that comes to England when she finds out that her cousin has passed away, and when she goes to their funeral, she finds out that she left this castle to her, and she's like, I don't understand why she left it to me. Like, what am I going to do with this castle? And our main male character, who's actually the stepson of her, his father passed away a while ago previously, so it's very much enemies to lovers. I would say borderline hate to love. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I just felt like the enemies to lovers, hate to love part really overpowered everything else that was going on. And so when that switch happened from enemies to lovers or hate to love, I felt like it was such an abrupt switch. It wasn't natural. It was like, okay, we're halfway through the book or 60% through the book. We have to like switch it really quickly. So that's why I gave it 3.5 stars, but it was still a good historical. I do like Diana Quincy. I think she takes historical romances and she puts her own twist on them, and I personally love them. So yeah, I like the narrators. The narrators were Timothy Campbell and Vanan Asadorian. I actually think she got an Arab woman to actually narrate the book, which was actually really cool considering the female character in the book is actually an Arab American. So I always love that. Now the next 2 books I'm going to talk about together because they're part of a duet, and you guys have heard me talk about these nonstop. I put them in a couple of videos, and that is One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig. So I actually saw a couple of people talk about this on Bookstagram and Book Talk last year, at the end of last year, and I was like, you know what, I don't know if like this seems my thing. I don't know. I figured out that gothic fantasies are one of my new favorite things to read. So if you have any gothic fantasy recommendations, I do have Starling House on my TBR for February, but if you have any other recommendations, please drop them in the comments. I loved this duet. The full circleness that the author kind of started and ended the book with, it was very interesting. Not many authors, I feel like, can do that really, really well, but for me, I loved it. I loved the characters, the side characters, the story. At the end of this book, I didn't know if I was actually going to like this book because I was like, uh-oh. This book ended on a cliffhanger, and it's one of those cliffhangers that's not always my favorite with 2 characters. And I'm like, I don't know how she's going to do this, but this actually turned out so well. I gave both of these books 5 stars. I physically read them and listened to the audiobook. I would highly suggest the audiobook. The narrator was Lisa Cordillon. She did an amazing job with the voices, the characters, the fantastical aspects, everything. It was so good. I would highly recommend this fantasy duet. Like, it was so good. Rachel Gillig is an author that's now on my radar that I'm going to pick up more things once she releases them because I'm a fan. I'm a stan. I would even say I'm an ambassador for her now, okay? Then I moved on to some contemporary romances because I had some arcs to read, new releases, and just books on my radar. So the first book that I read was actually a mafia romance, and that is When She Unravels by Gabrielle Sands. So this is actually Dark and Quirky Special Edition. I actually really love this special edition. This is like the perfect photo for a female character. She goes by like Val, or her real name's Valentina. You see that she is running away from her mafia husband, who's actually an enforcer in the States, and she runs away when her husband is like forcing her to do like unspeakable things, and he realizes he's kidnapped this girl, and she's like, please help me, and she's like, you know what, I'm finally gonna stand up and I'm finally gonna do it. I'm gonna help this woman. So she helps the girl escape, doesn't know where she goes, but she finds herself in Ibiza, and there she kind of gets herself tangled up with that kind of mob and mafia that's over there, which I've never actually read a mafia book that takes place in Ibiza, so I thought it was really, really interesting that this took place there. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 stars. I listened to the audio. I didn't write the narrators down, but this is a dark romance. There's a little bit of a captor-captive situation in the middle of the book. There's definitely some enemies to lovers. It's a very physical-driven romance. Like, their sexual chemistry is off the charts. It's very sexually driven at the beginning, and I actually enjoyed this book. So I would highly recommend that one if you're looking for a good mafia romance. Then I read Loving Romeo by Laura Pavlov, and this is a book that I want a lot more people to read because I feel like Laura Pavlov has written a lot of like small town romances in the past. That's what she previously published. Don't get me wrong, this is also a small town romance. Romeo, our main hero, is a fighter. He's a boxer. He owns a gym in this small town, and he is now training for one of the biggest fights of his life. And if you know me, I love MMA, boxer, fighter romances, underground fighting, legal fighting, all of it. I love it. And Laura Pavlov put so much of that MMA boxing training in this book that it was actually like, I would label it like borderline sports romance. Now, this is the enemies to lovers. Our female character, Demi, she owns a bakery like right around the corner from his gym. He hates her because she is like a spoiled princess. She comes from like this same small town, but it's like royalty basically. So you know, he has some things about that. And I just love the romance. It was very, like, just amazing. The narrators, who I didn't write down, of course I didn't, did an amazing job bringing this story to life. I actually listened to it in one day when it came out. I used an Audible credit and I bought it. Actually, I did it on Whispersync, so I got the audiobook for $7.50, but no regrets. I loved it. It was fantastic. Another small town contemporary romance I would recommend to a lot of people because I just thought it was fantastic, and I cannot wait to see the found family in this book. That's one thing. Found family in this book was so fucking good. I cannot wait for the other characters in this series because she nailed that found family aspect so much in this book. Now, another one that was kind of a flop that I read as an ALC, so advanced audio listener copy, was The Summer You Found Me by Elizabeth O'Rourke. The Summer I Fell, which was the first book in this series, I love that book. It was a 5-star read. This one, unfortunately, was a 3.5 star. Now, I will say that's only because I probably didn't read the second book. Our female character, Kate, in The Summer You Found Me, is actually like the ex-wife of the hero in the first book. She's dealing with addiction and all of this stuff like that. She really falls into addiction after she loses a child. So there is trigger warnings for that. And I just felt like it was like kind of glossed over a bit. There was just so much happening that she tried to throw in here that it didn't all like blend together very well. So that's why I gave it 3.5 stars. But it was the enemies to lovers kind of. It's kind of like he has been that friend always there in the background. Like now that they're finally having their chance, it's kind of like what would our romance be? So they're kind of exploring that. Like it was okay. It was okay. It was average. It just wasn't my favorite Elizabeth O'Rourke book. Now, then I read Twilight of Embers by Tessa Hale. This is a Why Choose, okay? Why Choose Dragon Shifter romance. If you would have told me I would have checked out this book on release day and got the audio for it, I would have told, like last year, I would have told you you're a liar. I would never choose to read a Why Choose romance, right? I had such a great time with this book. I actually gave it 5 stars. This has a full cast narration. There's, I think, Joe Arden and Zachary Weber's in it. There's so many heavy hitters. Like I said, there's 5 guys, and then obviously she's the female character. And I loved the story. I loved the ride. You jump right into it. You're trying to figure out who all these characters are. It's actually very easy to keep all the guys straight. Sometimes with Why Choose romances, I just get confused because a lot of stuff is going on, okay? I actually really love this one. Dragon Shifter, like I said, there's just so many things. Now, it doesn't on a major cliffhanger, like an absolute major cliffhanger. And I need the second book to come out like ASAP. But I really enjoyed this. Paranormal romance, a magical, dragon shifters. Like, we know we're all into that, okay? I loved this book. And I'm actually very surprised that I love this book. So, will I check out more of Tessa Hale? I don't know about her backlist, but I definitely will read the next book in this series. And that'll kind of determine what I read if I go back and read their backlist. But I love this book. The next book I read was actually in preparation for House of Flame and Shadow. I reread House of Sky and Breath. I had a live show in this book. Gave it 5 stars. I mean, it's a fantasy book. I'm not going to spend too much time because, hello, this book was amazing. I definitely started tabbing some stuff and then I stopped. So I just listened to the audiobook for this, but it was in preparation for House of Flame and Shadow, which I'm going to talk about a little later. Now, I did have 3 arcs that I read that I'm actually very excited that I read. I'm going to talk about most of these books in a video coming next week, so I'm going to gloss over them I'm just going to go over them pretty briefly. Ashes of You by Catherine Cowles. It is the end of the Hartley era. It is the 5th book in the Lost and Found series. It follows Lawson and Hallie, and I will say that this book was very, very, very good. The romantic suspense was good. I did not guess the serial unaliver, I guess you could say. It is a single dad nanny romance. Age gap, he's 13 years older. I don't say he's a silver fox, but he's has silver in his hair right here. So I really like that part of it. It was like a tiny tidbit that was dropped in there. I loved this book. It was a great conclusion. I would say this book and Shadows of You by Catherine Cowles, which is the 4th and 5th book in this series. They're 2 of my favorites in this Lost and Found series. So I want everyone to read it when it comes out on the 8th. I love it. Like I said, I'm going to talk about it in a video next week. Then I read Bride by Ali Hazelwood. For some reason, I kept calling it The Bride. I thought it was the first. Anyway, this is Ali Hazelwood's first ever paranormal romance, and I did not have any expectations going into this book, but I did read this for a Patreon exclusive reading vlog that I really dive into more of my thoughts. But this one is an arranged marriage paranormal romance. He is a werewolf and she is a vampire, so obviously you can see the tension with those 2 different species. So yeah, I would check it out when it comes out September 6th. I gave it 4 stars. It was a very enjoyable read. But like I said, I have a Patreon exclusive reading vlog for that. And Serpentine Valentine by Gianna Darling. This book also comes out on February 8th. The first week of February is a whammy for new releases, okay? Now, Serpentine Valentine is a dark academia book, which now I'm in my dark academia era, as well as my romantasy era, as well as my gothic fantasy era. You can see where I'm leaning more towards. In February, I'm leaning into those categories more. Now, Serpentine Valentine is a dark academia sapphic romance. It does have a revenge plot. My favorite sapphic romance that I've ever read was One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. I have a special edition right there. Love that sapphic romance, but this actually takes the cake for that, is my favorite. It's a very heavy character driven book. The character development in this is very heavy, and I personally really related to both females in different ways. And I absolutely loved it. I will say there's a lot of triggers. There's triggers right off the bat in the prologue. Gianna gives a great trigger warning, so you can totally skip it if you need to. It won't mess with the book. You kind of understand what's happening. But I give this one 5 stars. I thought for her first sapphic romance, she did an amazing job. The Dark Academia was vibes. It was all the vibes. All the vibes were there. It was a 5-star read. But I read Serpentine Valentine and Bride in a Patreon exclusive vlog that you can watch on my Patreon if you join. I always have a 7-day free trial, but I really enjoyed those 2. That was fun. Now, I did read Dante by Sadie Kincaid, and this was another mafia romance. I listened to the audiobook for this. The narrators were Elena Wolf and Tor Thom, which they did a really good job for the deep manly voice. He did a really good job, and her voice was also complimented the characters really well. Now, Dante and Kat, they meet in a way where her brother owes Dante money, and instead of him paying Dante back, he just kidnaps Kat, and she's like, what the hell is happening? Now, like I said, mafia, kidnapping, there's a secret baby, very much a hate to love. This is another mafia romance where the physical sexual relationship of our characters is very prevalent at the beginning, and the more emotional development comes at the end. And I gave this one 4 stars. I thought it was a good development. You see a lot of the characters in this first book that are going to get books later in the series, so it's a good setup. It was a good mafia romance series. I want to read more by this author. Joey is the second book, and if you look at it, you're like, Joey, that's a guy's name, technically. It's actually the nickname of Dante's sister, Josephina, so I'm very interested. She is a firecracker in this book, so I'm very eager to read that one, but I don't know when I'm going to pick up the audio for that one, because I have to buy them. It's not on Hoopla or Libby or anything like that, but I ended January with a doozy, okay? I ended it with House of Flame and Shadow. This book came out on January 30th. I'm filming this on February 1st, and let me tell you, I'm still trying to recover from like the emotional damage, but also reading for like 13 hours on Tuesday. I finished this whole book in a day. It's an 816 page book. This probably is one of my all-time favorite Sarah J. Maas books, and I'm not gonna lie, really, I went through the ringer with this book. I had a lot of emotions, and if you're wondering where Crescent City 2 ends and this one picks up, Crescent City 3, like turning the page. It picks up immediately right after you dive into the action, and the action does not stop until the end of the book. She put her whole ass in this book. She really put a lot in this book, and I love it. I'm already dying to reread it because I know there's just so many things that I like missed or whatever, but I listened to the audiobook, and Elizabeth Evans, who's a narrator, I made sure to write this down. For her only to narrate this whole book with all the different points of views, she did a phenomenal job. As a narrator, she's becoming one of my favorite narrators. So for fantasy, I will say, but I love this book. So many different POVs. Like literally my thoughts are fantasy. There's a little bit of sci-fi. I wouldn't call it sci-fi. I don't really know what to call it. Romance, emotional damage. That's all I put for my thoughts. But 5 stars. 5 stars. I physically listened and I read on my Kindle. I didn't read this physical book because I couldn't hold it for that long. But I will say this is my favorite book of the month. I have a lot of favorites on my Instagram. I did a whole reel. But I will say just the way that this book made me feel is my favorite. It's my favorite of the whole month. And it's probably going to be one of my top books of the year. I absolutely fell in love with that story. The characters, just all of them. All of it was absolutely amazing. Like I cried. Legit, I cried. Multiple times, actually. But yeah, those are the 18 books that I read in January. You can let me know in the comments your favorite read of January. For the emoji, drop me a dragon emoji. Yeah, drop me a dragon emoji, because I did read a couple of dragon fantasies. I'm not gonna lie, Fear the Flames and Twilight Remember. So yeah, drop me a dragon emoji in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for more content for me. As always, I hope you're living a novel life, and I will see you in my next one. Bye, guys.